Welcome to today's episode of The Growth Zone. I am Christian Bartsch. What is the core benefit of listening to this show? Business leaders in corporate and privately held companies gain insights into trends and strategies that provide them with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Each episode focuses on areas such as marketing, sales, innovation, or funding that is absolutely critical to the growth of companies, whether they are startups or corporate global players. Where management needs to juggle the challenges of market entries or knowing how to navigate the uncertainty of disruptive developments, mind feeding is where clarity evolves and helps solving organizational challenges. For those who listen to the entire episode, I have a special surprise gift. I'm also working on some great guests that are industry leaders in management, innovation, and marketing. And we will be talking in the future much more about the important trends that are affecting the way we manage our companies in the demand to being sustainable, more environmentally and socially friendly, and becoming more empathic leaders. So, let's get started on today's topic. Hello, and in today's topic, we are going to be talking about B2B startup sales strategies. With me is Zoltan Vardy, and he's based in London and travels back and forth, as I understand, between London and Budapest. So, Zoltan is a startup mentor, trainer, and speaker who helps B2B tech founders build predictable recurring revenues and scale their sales globally by applying his business development blueprint called the Launch Code. Zoltan, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself before we actually go into our topic?
Yes, absolutely, Christian. I focus my efforts as a startup mentor really on business-to-business tech founders who struggle with selling, who are uncomfortable with selling, and understand the importance of generating a predictable recurring revenue stream in order to scale their business. And I do this by teaching them effectively how to focus and structure and scale their sales and marketing activities. I think my approach is somewhat unique based on my background, which is kind of the combination of two very distinct mindsets. First, I bring a very structured and experienced approach based on closing over $2 billion worth of business-to-business deals in my senior corporate roles and major media companies, sort of one portion of my career. But I also understand the execution challenges of entrepreneurs because I've actually built and sold my own company. I've had successful exits as a founder, as an angel investor. So I think I get that mindset as well. So I really try to combine those two worlds, the best of those two worlds into one approach.
Yeah, that's great. So looking at B2B startup sales strategies, usually tech founders are usually often either have hardware, software, or they have SaaS solutions and so on. I suppose it's a broad band of people who come to you.
Yeah, I tend to focus on business to business services or SaaS products that are easily scalable. I think that's something that's critical because I do work across multiple markets and on a global basis. But I think the common theme, independent of what your product or service or even industry is really that a lot of founders have a real difficult time understanding that while they're very passionate about the product that they're selling or that they produce, they don't really understand the importance of selling it and marketing it. And I think that's a very important gap that exists. And so they often struggle with explaining why customers should actually buy what they're selling, or they don't have a sales process in place to find and attract the best prospects, or they kind of lack the ability to set targets and track their performance. So a lot of these basic elements, which once you've been in the sales and marketing world for a while are natural, are quite different. And so when I started working with startup founders after a 20-year kind of career in the corporate world, I realized that oftentimes they default to one of two sales strategies. One is what I call the I know a guy strategy. Right. That's when, you basically reach out to your uncle's friend who happens to have a business in such and such an area. And so, I'm sure they'll do business with us. Or, I once ran into a guy at a conference and, I'm sure we'll do business. Right. So it's a very networked personal approach. And on the other hand, you've got founders who really rely on this, what I call spray and pray approach. Right. They send out 1,000 emails and pray that somebody will answer. I don't think either is particularly effective and scalable. And so what I realized is that founders needed some sort of simplified, basic sales and marketing blueprint that they could follow in a very technical way, in the same way that a lot of them are very technically focused. And so that's what I did, was I kind of took all of the principles, the tools, the techniques that I had learned through closing over $2 billion in sales, and packaged them into the system that I call the Launch Code. And I started sharing that blueprint through personal mentoring programs, through group workshops, and an on-demand course as well. And so I'm very proud that after a couple of years, over 1,000 hours of mentoring with 200 founders in 25 countries, they really understand the benefits of this approach of how to really become good at business-to-business selling.
Yeah, because it's very different than to selling to consumers, and especially because different things involved, like decision stakeholders and other people.
Absolutely, it's a very complex process. Yeah.
Yeah, the consumer just need to find the pain points and remove all the fears, uncertainties, and doubts, and then you've got the sale.
Yeah,
it's only up to you then to actually deliver it properly and get the money as well. That's of course one last thing.
Exactly.
Sales people sometimes like to celebrate, say, "Yeah, I've closed them. Now I'm going to buy myself a Rolex or whatever."
Yeah,
you haven't made the money yet. The money has come in. You haven't delivered yet. The product hasn't been taken over, accepted, and checked off.
Yeah.
Warranty time hasn't passed. There's nothing to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, that also comes with experience, right? Once you've had enough of these experiences, you realize that, as you said, the deal is closed when the money is in the bank. But to your point about B2C versus B2B, I think it's a very important distinction to make. So business to consumer generally is low value, high volume type of selling, right? You're selling subscriptions for 20, 30 euros a month, which in itself is something that doesn't necessarily require a lot of personal connection or direct contact with your consumers in order to make the sale. That's a very different approach to business selling, where you're often selling very high value, high ticket items or services in the tens and 20s and 30,000 euros a month category, where you do require that personal touch, but personal, not necessarily physically personal, but also but creating that that chain of know, like, and trust, right? That's how companies will ultimately do business with you. First they have to know you, then they have to like you, and then they have to trust you. And it's only after that process that they actually go ahead and make that purchase.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can even sell to people even at 5,000 miles away. You can sell them something for 50,000 pounds or whatever. It doesn't matter, or dollars. But if they don't trust you, then it doesn't work. And sometimes, from my experience as well, sometimes the trust has to be built by getting actually to know you physically. I mean, meeting someone, even having a coffee or dinner or something together is enough to actually build the trust, because you get to know the other one.
Yeah.
And such a normal, typical environment where you have a drink, you have a conversation, see how the person treats us with other people and so on, and you notice what's the real attitude and the real values.
Well, it's unfortunately one of the drawbacks of this new hybrid world in which we live is that a lot of these personal connections are no longer at the forefront of the sales process, right? So people are making decisions on a lot less personal contact, but much more of impressions. And so that's where a lot of the things that that I talk about with my clients and the founders that I support is the importance of building, that brand in your online space on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on whatever social platform where you kind of build that authority in that area that you're operating in, and so people get to know you, and then they can then follow on with a specific inquiry.
Absolutely.
One of the customers I work with is actually a German company. They're in the agricultural technology space, and that was an interesting experience where they're selling a very high ticket service to crop producing companies, and they realized that to reach their customers, they really needed to develop closer relationships. So we worked with them to organize a series of events where the decision makers were invited. They would get meaningful, valuable information about their industry, but it also got to know the company, and then it was an opportunity then to follow up. And so, these kind of somewhat old school methods, I think, are still very important, even in the technology space.
Yeah, especially when it's something that maybe the one who's actually buying has to feel comfortable with and isn't fearing that if it's a wrong decision, they might even lose a job, because nowadays, of course, it is much easier to fire people, even in Germany, to fire people when you don't like them, or you can motivate them to leave by either put them in some location which they hate and eventually will start deciding to move, or you find a different opportunity. It's not like 50 years ago where you started in a company and you retired at the end of your time in that company. Nowadays, people have worked in 5, 10, 20 companies.
Well, you know what? That reminds me of an interesting, that push towards certainty, right? Which is effectively what this is all about protecting your role or protecting your job is what really determines a lot of the conversations that startups have with big companies, right? With big corporates. And I think, I often talk about how the challenge there is really the fact that the two sides of that equation, the corporate customer, the enterprise customer, and the startup come at the world and look at the world in two very, very different ways. Right. And if you think about it, having worked in the big corporate world for 20 years myself, I know that the absolute key motivator for a corporate decision maker is certainty. Right. The entire corporate infrastructure is built around the concept of, scenario planning, and projects are all budgeted, and, have meetings to have meetings about meetings. That kind of mindset it results in very slow decisions and sometimes frustrates startups, who on the other hand are extremely speed focused, right? It's about going to market quickly. It's a priority. And that clash of different mindsets, I think, is what often results in very frustrated founders who don't understand why they can't just close a deal with a big corporate customer. But there are tools and tricks you can use to move that process forward.
Yeah, it's a bit like it's even worse for selling to government. That gets you even crazier.
Well, yeah.
But when you're used to corporates and so on, you know how corporates work inside them. You try to just focus and not go crazy. But and sometimes corporations make decisions as well for certain crazy reasons, where you think, okay, so that's your reason why you're doing business with us? Okay. And I think, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm astonished.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are typical situations, but I think the way to get around that, and I talk a lot about this with my colleagues or my customers, is you have to know to target the right corporates. Not all corporates are created equal, and there's certain characteristics, I think, that you have to look for when you're targeting certain enterprise customers. And the first of those is, I like to see you have to hunt for deer and not elephants. And what I mean by that is, elephants are obviously these massive, lumbering, slow-moving organizations that have very long sales cycles and decision-making cycles. But there are challengers, I call them deer, who are sort of in that second or third position in their particular vertical, they're much more open to innovation. They're much more open to trying new things because they have something at stake, right? They have something to win if they're successful. And so focusing on those deer as a first step is a very good area of focus. The second thing I would say is, generally speaking, early stage companies should target companies that are privately held and not publicly owned. And the reason is because publicly traded companies have quarterly targets to hit. They have quarterly releases to the public markets. Their risk for something going wrong is like 10x versus private companies. They have more breadth of movement. They're willing to test, invest in the long term. And so I think those two categories already will help you narrow your focus on the companies that you speak to at the enterprise level.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's when you think of corporates, of course, you always think of the big companies, but smaller companies still with 5,000 or 50,000 and the employees, and don't necessarily have to be on the stock market.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're still huge, and when you get them as a client, it's a fantastic opportunity.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's a wide range of opportunities.
Yeah, but I think it's having that mix of customers as well, right? It's important that you don't put all of your eggs in that single basket of big corporations, because then you end up doing one deal a year and sweating bullets until you get to the end. If you have that mix of smaller deals, what I call rabbits, which are the small limber companies that are doing deals quickly, have a collection of those. Be hunting for a few elephants and then have a majority of your business in those deer category. That combination of customers is going to give you the best shot at building a recurring revenue stream, because you'll always have something in the pipeline that's gonna convert.
Yeah, and talking of challenges, so how would you characterize? Let's say a startup wants to find the challenge and thinking, "Oh God, fine, okay, privately held, but how do I really identify this challenger?"
Well, I think the first step you have to do is you have to, first of all, very clearly define your value proposition. And this in itself might seem quite obvious, but so many companies fail to do that, right? They don't take the time to determine, what problem they solve for who and why they're better than the competition. And I think that process of creating a very simple, easy to understand value proposition is really powerful. And I'll give you a specific example. I worked with a company not too long ago that sells kind of a database migration solution to financial services companies. And the founder there was telling me how, he had the most difficult time trying to explain to his potential customers, like, what is it they do. And so we worked together a little bit, and I have this kind of process of how to create a single sentence value proposition that even a 12-year-old will understand. And he went off to an industry conference where he met a lot of these people, and he had these individual conversations. And he calls me, after the conference, really excited. He said, "You will not believe, like, I was able to explain what I did in like 10 seconds, and people actually understood, and they understood what I was saying, and they asked for follow-up meetings and so on." So that kind of simplicity of communication is, I think, a very first step to identify, these deer. Who is it that's going to understand what you're saying? The second step is creating a very clear understanding of who that ideal customer is. And you can really dig deep into the parameters, right? I mean, there's empirical numbers like, size of revenues, geographic location, number of employees, anything that could be relevant for your particular industry. But there's a lot of soft things, right? There's a lot of things about, is this company something that, are they open to innovation? Do they have an accelerator program, for instance, or do they have corporate venture capital already? Those are going to be, elements that indicate they're open to innovative areas. I know that's something that you focus very much on, is innovation. And so getting that combination of clarity of message and then getting a very clear understanding of who your customer is the start of, I think, a very structured sales process.
Yeah. And from then how would you then proceed once you have helped them to identify these potential clients?
So the process I would proceed with is, based on that ideal customer profile, you can then identify up to, let's say, 50 companies that match that profile. And there's so many sources of information, a simple Google search, industry conferences, brochures, even your personal network, your professional network, right? I mean, you can start putting together a list of these companies that match that criteria. The next step is then to find individuals who could be in decision-making authority at these companies. And of course, LinkedIn is a fantastic source of information for that. Again, you can do your searches. And so what you're doing then is you're doing these kind of top 50 companies. You're identifying the decision makers. In some cases, you'll have multiple decision makers. In other cases, you won't find a decision maker. And what you'll actually do then is you'll find that person who you need to get in front of. And I think that's where you go from the science to the art of selling. And I think I personally very much believe this is, again, in order to get somebody to pay attention to what you have to say, they have to know, like, and trust you. And so you have to find that connection with that potential customer that is going to make them listen. And that connection could be any number of things. Here you are with a British-German background. Obviously, if you're speaking to a decision maker in Germany, being German in itself is not necessarily a point of difference. But if you're talking to a decision maker in Latin America as Germany, who happens to be German, and you're German as well, that obviously already is a connection there, right? You get in their comfort zone. I don't know if you've experienced this yourself in your own work, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And the same thing as well, like with people, like, for instance, I had once a client who came to me and then he said, did you go to this and this school? And I'm thinking, how do you get this idea? Yeah, because you use certain pronunciations, certain wordings and so on.
Really?
And I'm looking at mischievous, and I'm thinking, what's he going on about? And he is high level in one of the big companies in Germany.
Right.
And I said to him, yes, actually, I did go to one of these schools. And he said, yeah, his daughter went as well in Mexico. And I thought, okay. And he explained, yes, because before, of course, all teachers were coming from an area of Germany, a certain area. And since then, of course, after unification, they suddenly switched them over. And then all from area of Berlin were coming and having the opportunity to go and teach at those schools. And only they had the opportunity.
Right.
And that's how, of course, you can practically identify the people. And that's why people always before often told me, do you come from Hamburg? And I thought, huh? I've never been to Hamburg at that time. Now I've been twice to Hamburg in my life. But before I was thinking, it's crazy. Even a UPS guy said to me, are you from Hamburg? And I was like, no.
Well, I think the point is here that you can create that connection with somebody, even on a small thing. But the other thing you can do is obviously look for common connections. You can ask for referrals. If obviously the best way to get into a decision maker, if you can have somebody introduce you, right? If they just simply connect you online and they say, hey, here's so and so, they've got an interesting proposition. You guys should listen to this. Already, you've created that initial, you've gotten into their comfort zone, and I think once you do that, you'll ultimately create, in my mind, sort of a top 10 list of potential targets, of potential customers. And that's a target list that's constantly going to be evolving as you go out and you start the sales process. Some of them will fall out, some of them will come in. But having that kind of structured approach, I think, is really, really important. And it's what's going to lead to this type of high ticket enterprise sales that's going to ultimately have a significant impact on your business. And that kind of structured approach is something that I would very much I think a lot of early stage companies lack, right? They don't have that sort of structured approach, and I think that's something that mindset has a huge impact on the effectiveness of their outbound sales efforts.
Yeah, exactly, and especially getting that connection and not just blasting out emails. Because when you look at LinkedIn, you get so much spam that is totally irrelevant. I once got an email from somebody where I thought, that has nothing to do with any of the businesses, or not even with any of the business and things I ever did my entire life. And I thought, how is this relevant? Makes no point.
And they probably called you Christina.
No, that didn't go so far, but it was something that was absolutely irrelevant. I wouldn't even imagine of doing some kind of business or something in that area. Totally pointless. And that's the thing we notice. It's just some machine pumping messages out and randomly and even so poorly that you think, really put in a little bit of extra, invest maybe one day extra and do the job properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use this example of Christina because I have gotten cold emails addressed to Pam and Susan and all these guys. So you kind of wonder what's going on. But I think, and I'll be honest with you, this is a bit of a controversial view for me. So I am not a fan of cold emailing and cold calling. I think it's a very, very high effort, low return approach. And I get challenged on that a lot, by the way, just kind of in the LinkedIn space. But I genuinely believe that if you're selling sort of enterprise level services, you have to create that environment where people are going to actually know, that you exist. So that, that's the importance of regularly publishing content on LinkedIn, of going to a situation where you're going to build an inbound marketing funnel as well. So people are discovering you, they're seeing your content, they're understanding what you're doing, you're giving them an opportunity to look and find you. Already you see that the number of leads might not be as high as with cold emailing, but the conversion rate is significantly higher. I would say 2 to 3 times higher, at least.
Yeah. The only thing is that with LinkedIn, is like with Facebook before and TikTok and so on, you practically you go down with your content nowadays in LinkedIn. It's got so rapidly exponential that when you post stuff, it's the value of LinkedIn has gone really, really down. And the interesting thing is, a few years ago, I did a letter. I sent letters out, and sometimes I sent as well pamphlets with other kind of information, but not just like the cheesy stuff. And actually, I got even replies, and I got even a 8% response, and of those I closed 95%, which actually is quite good when you think of it. That normally that kind of stuff would usually get you 1%.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
I'm sure that even the content that we nowadays are generating for LinkedIn, and that's unfortunately, I've written a book on LinkedIn and stuff, and then I see how things have changed massively, where you then really have to put up a lot of effort to produce a lot of content, and then there's at the end for certain startups that don't have the capacity, eventually the realization, I'm pumping a lot of content and not seeing it. And I think there's a variety of ways to even get people actually to see the stuff, even if it's online. There are ways to make people aware of it, because the fact is many decision makers, maybe they go once a week to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But now if you get so much spam messages, you get fed up and then you don't go in.
Yeah. Well, look,
it's counterproductive for everybody.
Yeah. Look, I mean, LinkedIn, I think is a tool you can't ignore if you're into business to business sales. It's a question, of course, of how much effort you put into it and what the return is. I don't know the exact statistic, but I believe that still only something like 2 or 3% of LinkedIn members actually post regularly. So it's still a relatively small number. Obviously, it's a huge base of people. But I think if you can find that right balance, not going overboard, you can actually build a lot of knowledge and trust, and build that experience of people understanding that you're an expert in something, right? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, an overwhelming majority of services are identical in so many different areas, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? You differentiate yourself by the simplicity of your communication, so that people understand what problem you solve, and you differentiate yourself by building authority through the content that you produce, so that people that could be your potential customers feel like, well, this guy knows what, or this woman or this guy knows what he's talking about or she's talking about, right? So there's kind of that trust element there. And I think that's a great way to do it. Obviously, LinkedIn is just one way. If you produce a regular newsletter, you're offering valuable content to your list of subscribers. That's also very useful. All of this is kind of the long tail, so there's quite a bit of effort into it, but it pays off in the end.
Exactly, and it's the same thing like with search engine optimization and so on. People eventually will search you as well, want to see what are you online doing and so on.
Yeah,
outside of LinkedIn and that. There are as well things that you can always do to add things, because sometimes big corporations even just simply go and Google something because they need a solution, and they don't go to LinkedIn maybe because suddenly this is emergency, and then they find you and they see, hey, you've solved my problem, I like you, and I stick with you. And that's a good thing. Large corporations are, as you said, sometimes quite slow. Sometimes they're fast, but sometimes once they've got you and they know, okay, this works, they stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you've got some crazy person in there that has some other foul play in the idea. But most of the times, they're quite reliable.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I think one of the things I often emphasize in my work with founders is the importance of having high quality online content in native English and underline native English, right? Because a lot of companies, I mean, obviously companies in the UK and not going to fall into this trap. But a lot of the companies in some of the emerging markets of Europe will have founders who aren't native English speakers, understandably, and so they will produce English language content which reeks of misspellings and misuse of words and all that stuff. And I can't tell you there's no better way to turn people off than if you're trying to get into the UK market and somebody Googles you and sees their website is full of poor English. It's just going to make you seem unprofessional and unprepared. And so I think very basic things done well is critical to just be on the map for your international expansion plans, for sure.
Exactly, because the human mind just tries to find reasons why not to do business with you. Exactly. And they might even think maybe it's a scam website or any kind of thing, which nowadays when you look at the scammers sending messages, they're English or German or other languages. It's free of errors. It's better than an English teacher can write. You think, I think, wait a minute, have they gone all to a new school and learned English, German, and other languages? Or have they just been smart and hired some English teachers to write it for them? Because the text is really, really good nowadays.
Yeah, and well, obviously, AI also makes it a lot easier to draft quality.
Exactly.
Quality
even criminals are smart enough to use ChatGPT and all that. Whether it makes it better, it's a different question.
Exactly.
But that's the thing. Sometimes it doesn't always necessarily make sense, and that's the thing. People read as well and read to try to understand what you're writing there, and if it's difficult to understand. And the funny thing is simplicity actually works in many other areas. I had to write several letters to a Canadian court on a legal matter where I was needed as a given advice on it. And actually, based on those two letters, the court decided to throw out all the evidence because they realized, he's right. It's all garbage. Mm-hmm. Throw it out. No, it's garbage.
That must have been quite a powerful letter then.
Yeah, it was a powerful letter, but short. And the trick was, or let's say the key game of these things, and I'm sure you've seen in other things, simplicity isn't just about how you use the words, but actually keeping short sentences precise, or as the German lawyers would usually say, like hammering it in, boom, 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 Boris, and so on.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that's something that I talk about a lot. A lot of the technical founders I work with obviously are living in a world where everybody speaks that very technical language. And the reality is, look, you have so many messages bombarding you every single day. If you can't explain to somebody in 8 seconds, what problem you solve, how you solve it, for who, and why you're better than the competition, you're just going to lose them. They're one click away. And so I think it's really critical that you, first of all, communicate very simply. The other thing is critical is to communicate with the customer in mind. So many times, I'll work with these companies and their entire website is about me, 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 me. This is what we do. This is why we're good. This is how we've done it. Nobody cares who you are. What they care about is what problem do you solve for them. And that fundamental insight is what drives good messaging, right? You have to create a very clear picture of the desired outcome of the customer that you're speaking to, explain what problem they have, and then talk about how you solve their problem and give them a call to action. Don't talk about how fantastic you are, because nobody cares until they understand why they should even spend time worrying about who you are.
Exactly. Otherwise, you can always just call your company Acme Laboratories. That's totally enough. And then everybody knows, okay, you're the best, fine. But that doesn't solve the needs or the challenges and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. It makes it very important. And, a great example of this, I worked with a company that provides this kind of factory production auditing tool for automobile companies. And they were typically communicating on their website in the way that, their technology, their product, their team. And then, we really shifted that around and made it all about the factory manager and how, they want to have a timely and reliable audit for their systems that saves them time. And so we completely shifted the communication to that. And what ended up happening is this company, which is based in Poland, ended up closing several new clients in Germany by shifting its their communication strategy to become much more customer first.
Yeah, exactly, because that's the key difficulty. And often some tech companies suffer sometimes from a bit too much academics.
Yeah.
Because they're totally in the academic field and I think they have to write it. And the same thing you see as well sometimes in presentations. They are so boring and so naked in a way because you just have a jumble lot of text on each slide, and it's hideous. It's nothing appealing. Instead of just reducing it to maybe 3 bullet points, put a picture in it, put a nice design to it, and it's not have to be fancy. And it looks already nicer, and I'm willing to look at it. I'm not trying to find a binocular to be able to read the text.
Yeah. Well, even more. I mean, obviously, there's visual elements you can fix there, but I think that the structure of a good sales presentation is always problem, solution. How can we work together? Right? Here's the problem we've discovered. This is what you probably are experiencing in your industry. Here's our unique solution to this problem. This is how we brought it to life, and this is the process we can go through together for us to provide the solution for you. It doesn't have to be more than 10 pages. It shouldn't have a lot of text. Just that structure of problem, solution, how do we work together is going to get you 90% where you need to go to get a meaningful conversation started.
Exactly, because then as well the customer or the client then knows, okay, you know what you're doing, you know step 1, step 2, step 3.
Exactly. You understand me, right? I mean, everybody wants to feel like they've understood, right? Everybody.
And they want to know that you know what you're doing and you're not messing about and you have no clue. Yeah. And even if you don't know how the solution at that time, but you have at least a process that's going to get you to the solution, because certain things at first you understand, okay, obviously this is coming out of the machine. So we need to find out what's the problem. And then you have to investigate and so on. But we'll do this and these things, and we go this step and this step and this step. And then we'll do this and this, and then we'll find it. And then we work out together to fix it. Boom. And everyone knows, okay, at least they're not going around like crazy rats running around fighting everybody, just trying to find out who did it. That's not the problem. That's not the solution. We want to fix the problem, not who did it.
Well, you mentioned process. Process obviously is very important in the way that you actually approach your customer and you provide a solution. Process is just as important internally. And one of the things that I've discovered in a lot of these early stage companies is that there's no guidelines for execution, right? Everything is an ad hoc situation. And so, one of the things I try to do very early on is like, guys, let's decide what good looks like. What are your goals? What are your long-term goals? What are your midterm goals? What are your short-term goals? What KPIs, key performance indicators, are you going to use to track your progress? And then when you actually have those things set down, what you'll find is that you're able to start tracking your performance, and I think that's so critical, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs are very intuitive, right? That's their nature, and so they make a lot of decisions based on gut feeling. But once you have a clear set of objectives that you want to reach, once you've identified how you will track your progress, you can look at the data and make decisions based on data and not on gut feeling. And I think that's a really important thing. And that goes for, when you're, how many leads have you generated? How many of those converted into conversations? How many of those converted into deals? How long is the sales cycle? There's all sorts of data that you can track in a simple Excel. You don't have to go into these very sophisticated online tools. Just start tracking that, get into that habit. I work with a company that's that has a streaming service that helps sports teams to stream their games to fans. And they're typical entrepreneurs. They're going headfirst into the wall. And we sat down and we said, look, guys, let's put together these goals and let's set up this performance tracking system. And how many leads do you have? How many opportunities? What's your financial outcome? What's your average value per customer? All of these very basic things. And all of a sudden they find themselves making much better decisions because they're using data rather than gut feeling to get to the outcome.
Exactly. And sometimes it's good as well to even be with them when they're doing certain conversations and so on with potential new customers to find out if they're saying certain things that are, let's say, counterproductive just because they think they have to say it. And it's absolutely not even demanded by the client, but they're just saying something stupid that's putting off the client. And sometimes it's good. Like I once had a marketing advisor. He then put a paper beside my desk, and it was like the door stopper, so to say, don't say these things.
Okay.
I used to say them just because I don't know why. I just did them for whatever reason. It was somehow subconsciously done. And I don't do them nowadays. I don't even know anymore what they were, but I don't do them.
Well, I guess he did a good job of making you forget then.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key thing. He was quite good in that. Definitely. Right? But that's the thing. You see these things, and it's so funny because I just recently we started a new business area a few months ago, and first thing I did as well when we were working with our ads guys, I created an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, and then wrote all people from coming through the website, coming through ads and so on for this and this area and so on, how many are being sold, how many are this and that and so on. So easy. And as well, giving feedback as well to the marketing guys and the ad guys so that they know, okay, this kind of people we are getting. And I said, hey, wait a minute, you're targeting obviously the wrong age or the wrong group of people and so on. And giving them constantly feedback, which they were not used to, because they thought it's a black box. It's not a black box. We see people coming through the door, even if you've got a physical shop and an online shop. People are coming in and you're finding out, okay, am I attracting the right people or not? Or am I trying tire kickers and so on? Yeah, that's the wrong approach. You're offering the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes they think, oh, but the others do that as well. Just because they do it, it doesn't mean they're smarter.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this question of customers and tire kickers and not and so on. It's interesting how you can. What I found is as you build your business, you start out with a relatively broad understanding of who your customer is. And as you progress forward, what you start realizing is that certain elements of your assumptions are incorrect. And generally speaking, you end up focusing more and more and more until you ultimately decide that there's like this ideal customer who is the perfect profile for what I'm selling. And I always tell my clients, I said, the goal here is not to be everything to everybody. It's the goal is to be the perfect solution for that one problem, for that one person. And as you go through that process, it's always about focus. And that's when you sort of know that you've got it right or you're heading in the right direction, is when you start seeing your sales conversations faster, fewer objections, the process goes much more smoothly and you start really taking off. And that's when you can really build traction and achieve, the ultimate outcome of any sales process, which is product market fit, right? Where you've got that sense of that perfect fit.
Exactly. And then the people as well, they have less problems as well with your product because they are fit and not. Yeah. It's like trying to sell somebody tires for big trucks when they have small delivery vans. It just doesn't fit.
Exactly. It just doesn't fit.
Work.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you could close them and they say, oh, super, I got 5%. Like when I did training, when I was left school, I did an apprenticeship with BMW. And the first thing in logistics they taught me, don't ever order based on discounts. And why? Because one guy once ordered 1 million rubbers and we have still not used them all up. Oh my God.
You got a great deal, I guess, yeah?
Yeah, and I thought at the beginning, you can use them. But then eventually you start thinking, wait a minute, how many? I still have got my rubber that I used to have in my pencil case from school. And I haven't used it up. So I'm sure they still got at least 500,000 still somewhere lying around and not being used.
Yeah.
And they may be trying to, please take that rubber with you. We need space.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
But what's interesting is oftentimes what I'm challenged with on this is what if we don't, if we narrow our focus on our customer, then we're going to lose out on certain, other types of customers.
Yeah, and you get fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, and I think that my experience, having worked literally with a couple of hundred different companies in this kind of business to business tech space, is that actually the opposite happens. You end up communicating the perfect message for the perfect customer, and you're able to close much more business much more quickly because there's no noise there, right? You're not asking people to they could do this, but they could also do this. They do this. If you're good at everything, or if, everything obviously in quotes, it just kind of implies that you're not an expert in anything, right? And so I think it's really, really important that you really, really focus on what you're good at for the right customers. And I'll give you a specific example. So I'm actually chairman of a company called Antavo. Antavo is a scale-up business at this stage. They're a loyalty management platform for enterprise. They basically help big companies put together loyalty programs, and at the beginning of their journey, they really were a one-size-fits-all type of service provider. They provided consulting, they provided on loyalty programs, they provided all sorts of back office support. They had the technology, and as they evolved, they realized that what they were really, really, really good at was the technology. Their platform was fantastic. Its usability, its UX. That's where they were really great. And so what they realized is they had to find partners, consulting companies who are experts in loyalty, who would actually pre-sell, the concept of loyalty to their end user. And then they would bring in Antavo as their technology partner. And the minute that they shifted there and they realized what they were really good at, their business skyrocketed. And to this stage, they're a global business with companies like BMW and KFC and big brands around the world that are working with them because they were able to focus on what they're really good at. And that's been a fundamental shift that I think a lot of companies can learn from. Find your focus. As I like to say, choose your love and love your choice, because that's going to build your business.
Exactly, and then it's much easier to build it up, and it's clearer, and you're not wasting resources on things that actually not going to generate any kind of revenue, or maybe if they generate revenue, it's just going to explode in your face, and then
exactly.
You've lost the money again. You've got pain and agony and unhappy clients.
Yeah.
And you notice you've been selling the tires to the wrong people.
And who wants something to explode in their face after all?
Exactly. But that's the thing. Sometimes it even happens that you maybe have a client who at the beginning is the right fit, and somehow they change, management changes and everything. And you really notice, okay, the values have changed. I think they no longer matching our values. Doesn't make sense anymore. If you can't even face having them on your, let's say, on your list of good clients and so on, or you can't properly do business with them because they're cutting corners and doing creepy stuff. I think, no, that's going to hurt us as well in the long run, because others will, it's like with association. What do you call it? Branding by association and so on. And if your brand is associated with negative things, then eventually your brand becomes crappy. From once being great, now being for the bit.
Although to be fair, it can work the other way around, right? That's why you're collecting logos as you're building your business. If you have blue chip logos around your service, then people will believe that you offer a valuable solution because they see others have bought it before. So
that's the same thing with a big client of mine as well, who bought because a certain government authority is our client, and I once thought, okay, that's the reason. I was totally astonished, and the way they formulated as well their decision, I thought, wow, okay. But they were the only ones who decided, but nevertheless, a great customer. I've had them for several years. So obviously it was for them a good decision. But that's the thing. You sometimes don't expect corporates to buy for a certain reason, but if they buy it because you maybe put the extra effort before to get other clients, and then they see, you have providing services to this and this and this client who are not easy to get, and they think, okay, if they went through all that process, all that pain to go and buy from you, then obviously it must be a no-brainer for us too.
Absolutely.
And of course, the more clients you have, and more meaningful, because sometimes as well people know each other as well. Sometimes people will talk to other people and they say, hey, how's experience with this and this company? Oh, they're great. Super. And one key thing, even competitors speak with each other, because of course people switch companies as well. And actually they know each other, they meet at events and say, oh, I'm having a great time and we've got this software, this is fantastic, great service and so on. And they say, oh, really? Starting, we should try it out. And then the other one, what? They've got it and they've got it, then we need it as well. Whereas they have the fear of missing out.
Exactly.
The only one in the market who's left behind.
Yeah. Well, I think that, at the end of the day, look, that's why enterprise sales make sense for a large number of companies, is because it's a hard road to walk. But once you get to the end, the riches, not just financially speaking, but in terms of the brand association, can be quite great. And for the exact same reasons you just described, you start creating that air of knowledge, of experience around you that attracts new customers. And so that's why I would very much encourage companies that are selling high ticket solutions to put a certain amount of effort into enterprise selling, doing it right, doing it, being very focused on the way they communicate their offer message, being very structured in the way they sell and contact these customers and draw them in so they can speak to, the best prospects. And then finally execute based on clear targets so they can make better decisions and reach their revenue goals.
Absolutely. So it was great having you here on the show, Zoltan. If people want to somehow get in touch with you, find out more on anything, how can they get to connect with you?
So I would love to connect with business-to-business tech founders who are struggling with sales, who are not comfortable in that space, who want to build kind of predictable recurring revenues. They see the value of that. The first step I always take when I start working with founders is to share kind of a 5-step process they can follow to create a very simple value proposition. So this is kind of the lowest hanging fruit because they experience the results immediately. So I wanted to share this process with your listeners. Just go to my name, zoltanvardy.com/podcast, and you can access a free guide, free value proposition video guide. Once they've seen it, they've done the exercise, and they feel like they want to learn more about what I can do and how I can help them, they can set up a one-on-one call. It's on my website, and they can learn more about it. So the address again is zoltanvardy.com/podcast.
Great. That'll be wonderful. I'll add it as well into the comments so that people as well can click on it.
And of course, they can connect on LinkedIn with me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll add as well your LinkedIn profile as well to it. So if people want to use that. So thank you for having been here. And I'm sure we'll be talking in future about similar topics.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Growth Zone show with Christian Bartsch. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review or rating here on iTunes or on podchaser.com. If you found the content helpful, then share it on social media, please. I would like to invite you to follow our show so that you don't miss the upcoming interviews with leaders in the market. Simply visit the website meetchrisbartsch.com. I will be adding the link into the description of this episode so that you just need to click on that link. On my website, you will also find the links to free templates. If you're looking for the books I have published on marketing, innovative technology, and sustainable business strategies, just simply click on publication to find my book list. The world is constantly changing in response to trends and events. As a business leader, you need to bypass the sandbanks that can hurt your performance. For those of you who are signing up to follow the show, I have reserved a few copies of my ultimate guide on content marketing and an ESG compliant cheat sheet. This is the strategy that got me top corporate clients like McDonald's, Linde, Hewlett-Packard, Deutsche Bank, Volvo, and many others. That strategy has been working for over 10 years and also got me contacts with police, transport authorities, military, and several universities, and even leading research institutes. For sure, it also worked wonders as it got me many small, medium-sized enterprises and international clients around the world. The link to sign up to our free broadcasting service and the guide is at meetchrisbartsch.com. That will give you access to the most recent versions of my ultimate guide on content marketing. You can follow me on Twitter by using the Twitter handle capbartsch. It's spelled CAPBARTSCH. Yes, that is CAP, Bartsch, or spelled Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel.